So I'd like to welcome you to the Unmasked Relationship Factor Series. I am AliNICOLE WOW, also known as Majesty, and most of you are familiar with me from my masked Majesty role, and I am unmasked for this particular series. And so I've been doing this series as part of an extension of my relationship counseling and coaching work, and wanting to provide some expanded awareness around resolutions that can happen for individuals when they learn how to really empower themselves and discover their own unique answers without having to be inundated with so much advice. I've also been shining the light on some unseen dynamics, and again, just providing some expanded awareness around certain areas. And so normally when I'm doing these particular segments, I don't have a planned agenda. I just come on and I get present with the space and see exactly what is coming up, just during this time. Obviously, it's always going to be around relationship dynamics. So something I'm feeling guided to really talk about during this time is the communication factor, which is very multi-layered as it relates to not just the unseen dynamics within the communication factor in relationships, just in general. Whether people are in serious committed relationships or not, communication is key. It's always going to be important. There's nothing that you do that's really outside of communication in some format, be it verbal, body language communication. There's always something going on as it relates to the communications dynamics. So I do want to talk a little bit about some of the challenges, so to speak, that come up in the communications dynamics as it relates to relationships with couples. Of course, some of this can apply to family relationship dynamics or just close friends, but because relationships are more than just about your significant other. Relationships are relationships on various levels, and like communication, we don't get out of here without having relationships and having communications. So I'm going to talk about it a little bit because communication happens to be one of the biggest breakdowns, of course, within relationship dynamics. I mean, there are so many other breakdowns, but certainly the communication factor, is one of them. So we often hear that men are bad communicators. They don't really communicate effectively when it comes to relationships, that they don't talk enough. And in some cases, that's true, but I see and experience so much behind the scenes, obviously, because of the work, that I do. But women also have communication problems as well. Sometimes they over communicate, which can be detrimental to the wholeness factor of the relationship. And I'll talk a little bit about that as we get more into the segment. I just want to isolate just a few areas, during this time. So men are ones that are known to be withholders, but women can be withholders in the communication factor as well. So let me talk about this. So a lot of times there's the assumption that when women communicate, men should automatically know what they mean when they're communicating. So communicating in opposites, like saying I'm fine when I'm really not fine, and expecting that if the term fine is used, that that's not really what's going on, and you need to actually do some research on this. You need to be a detective and find out what's going on. And instead of actually talking about it and communicating about it, again, sometimes women can communicate in opposites. So I'm going to speak a little bit about also why women sometimes do that. They already feel that they're going to be misunderstood, misinterpreted. And sometimes when they try to communicate their feelings, often they can get minimized or again misunderstood. And so there's a tendency to just want to give statements, yeah, I'm fine, I'll be okay, but inwardly it's killing them. And again, like I said, I get to witness a lot behind the scenes. The things that aren't spoken, aren't communicated amongst couples, typically in counseling or so, or relationships outside of the relationship dynamics that the communication needs to be taking place in, others hear about it. So I actually want to talk a little bit about that as well. So women too can have a tendency a lot of times to share what's going on in their relationships with close friends and others without really talking directly to their spouse or significant other. And men certainly can have those challenges as well, where they can kind of vent to a close friend or so and won't say anything to the female. And to their defense too, sometimes they feel like, well, if they do say something, then the female's misinterpreting that and she's not feeling appreciated. And so it's a lot that goes on. And even though what I'm sharing is very basic, very practical, but sometimes it's the very subtle yet significant things that aren't addressed and kind of just brushed over. But in all honesty, everyone can stand to level up in the communication factor. And instead of going out and buying publications and reading tons of blogs around how to be more effective, be a better communicator within a relationship, I always encourage that people do their own inner exploration. So I'm really big on intentional journaling, and I'm actually, published author of over 300 interactive journals on Amazon, and they're for different industries, different core focuses. So as it relates to doing the inner work, the inner exploration, you get to discover what is unique for you in terms of how you actually need to be participating in life, participating in relationships a certain way. What is going to be your ultimate best communication factor, for each phase? And so being intentional, with this and developing this as a practice is going to help you to know your truth versus reading, different materials that can certainly provide advice and everything. And I'm not saying not to consider some of the tips and some of the advice from publications or podcasts or blogs, so to speak, but you don't need to take all of those things as the gospel. I do believe that sometimes you're going to hear things that will resonate with you. And again, you need to act upon that. That is divine wisdom for you to apply. But don't get so much in the do's and the don'ts based on a lot of expertise, that's out there, different gurus who are trying to tell you the best ways that you need to go about having a relationship. Again, those things can be helpful, but you really need to do your inner work. You really need to get present to discover what what is my best communication factor and for this particular situation, right? So no one gets to be lazy in this leveling up initiative as it relates to cultivating great communication within a relationship. Because again, communication is key, and you have to be very solid with that. Otherwise, things are going to be extremely challenging. And so this is a very, very layered topic, and I actually do teachings and trainings, around this particular area, even as it relates to the body communication, the nonverbal communication, all these different things that play a major part in terms of what's going to make or break a relationship. So I feel like I can talk about a few other things, but I kind of want to stay with this, for a moment, but I don't want to go too far down the rabbit hole because then I'll start breaking off into a teaching and training. And this is not what this series is about. Again, this series really is about creating expanded awareness and being able to provide some next level comprehension for you so that you can ultimately start to carve out your own unique path, your own unique lane as it relates to how you're going to be better within relationships, right? So, on that note of you being better within relationships, so let me speak to this. We hear a lot about becoming the best version of yourself. And I use that terminology, that phrasing, as well. And sometimes that can get to be a little bit cliche. And what can be interesting even around that dynamics is that there's a template that's given of what your best self should look like, but you have to individually be able to define that for yourself, right? Because as you are leveling up to become this best version of yourself, this version of you has to participate in a relationship of some sort. So we're talking about relationship with a significant other. You want to make sure that as you're evolving, though you don't have control over the other person and their evolution, but you do want to create some dynamics that's going to be inviting for that individual to step up their game or to be coming along with you. And that too is part of the communication factor, right? So at this moment, something I am going to invite you to do is to take 3 nice deep breaths, please. All right. So I want you to just ask yourself, what areas as it relates to communication can I level up during this time? So just be present with that. So even if you didn't fully hear the question, just be present with the intention around that, right? And something may come up initially, could be just one word or a feeling or a phrase or so. And so I just want you to keep that in mind. We'll come back to what came up for you. So the reason why I invited you into something very simplistic and very practical like that is because that's really the way that you need to begin this inner exploration and really discovering for yourself what's going to be best and how you need to be in every scenario. And so if you have to use kind of that question and that phrasing, that prompting for yourself in each scenario, it's going to be to your highest advantage to do it. Again, no one gets to be lazy in this type of initiative. And it can seem like that's a lot of work if I got to keep remembering this and that. Remember, when something's new, it seems like work. But once it becomes a part of you, then it is just a natural progression. It's an embodiment. So you don't even look at it as I'm actively really doing something. I'm not saying that you're on autopilot with this, but it does help you to be more intentional And when it comes to the communication factor, you've got to be intentional if you want to succeed in relationships. So again, instead of dumping a lot of advice, I want you to check in with yourself consistently and to see, how you're doing, how you can take things to the next level, how you can be a better listener, not just a better listener for the other person, but a better listener to yourself. Because sometimes when you lack the proper communication with yourself, whether it's that inner talk that you have, or, just things that you ponder, things you're saying to yourself, if you lack the proper communication with yourself, you certainly can't be effective within your spouse or significant other relationship communications dynamics, right? So I want you to now think about what came up for you in terms of being present with that question, with that prompting. And I want you to really ponder for the next few days around that particular aspect, that particular area, and ask, is there anything else that you need to know about this particular area? Or what are some actions that you can take? What's your best next step around that particular dynamics, right? As it relates to the communication factor. And so start having a better relationship with yourself, a better communication with yourself, so that you can enhance what you're doing for you, and then be able to bring this into not just the dating relationship or your significant other, your spouse, relationship, but relationships as a whole. This will improve everything when you can actually do this and be intentional in this way. So I want to shift gears for just a moment, because what was sort of coming up now is it's still in the communication line, but it's a little different. It's really about the things that you need to be communicating about, because a lot of times people are communicating, they're not communicating things that they should be, and then they are communicating or over communicating in areas where it's really not necessary. And anytime you can clutter the relationship, the communication space with unnecessary stuff, oh man, it's detrimental. Let's just say that. It's detrimental to the relationship. If you think about how clutter within itself impacts an atmosphere, impacts a person, then just think when there's cluttered communication of unnecessary stuff, but then the things that should be said, that need to be said, aren't being talked about. So that's something else I want you to think about and be present with, is what am I saying that maybe I don't need to say? And what is it that is not being said that I do need to be talking about? The over communicating and the under communicating. All right. So I want you to think about that. So something that's coming up too is the area of play and having more fun within the relationship. And again, you can still tie this into the communications dynamics. How much humor are you bringing into the relationship? And again, even from a communication standpoint, and I think that that's really important, because that's one of the areas that's really overlooked, that most people don't really think much about that. I strongly encourage couples to go to whether, comedy clubs together, or to watch comedy. And I serve in that industry, as well. But it's really important that couples really laugh together. The saying that couples that pray together stay together, and that's true to a certain extent. But couples that laugh together and play together stay together. And so, being able to have those type of fun dynamics within the relationships, they really help you during the times when things are maybe rough, right? And it could not be the dynamics within the relationship itself, but just if one or both of you are having a hard time, or just things going a certain way in life, not going a certain way in life that you would desire, then if you've got a lot of times where you've had to play and you've had the laughter, you can pull from those things. Those are great reminders to say, you remember when we did X, Y, and Z? Or you remember that joke that such and such said, or when we went to this particular thing. You want to have kind of a bank that you can pull from, so that in those times where you feel down, the communication can come to a new level by reminding or revisiting a certain scenario that brought joy, and then it causes you to laugh. And again, this can be also too about family dynamics and things like if you went out somewhere, a family member did X, Y, and Z, or a friend did X, Y, and Z. You just want to be able to have those as part of the communication factor. Instead of bringing up past events that are not pleasant, or reminders of when you did this, X, Y, and Z. No, be able to have those things that you can pull from to bring more calm and peace into the relationship. And again, laughter is the best medicine. So you would be surprised how many couples really can heal their relationships through laughter, through humor. So that's a part again of the communication factor. So I'm going to bring this segment, to a close, because I can feel myself wanting to break off again into like some type of training. And I have trainings, around this particular area. So be sure to look at the playlist or listen to the playlist that I have, and avail yourself to those. Also, you can learn more about my works in this area. So we've unmasked some communication factors and dynamics during this time. Be sure to practice what I've invited you into in terms of being intentional and exploring, doing that inner exploration for yourself. So I look forward to being back with you soon. Take care.